If you've spent months researching Airbnb and you still haven't pulled the trigger, it's probably not because you don't know enough. It's because the more you research, the more ways you could imagine of getting it wrong. And the one thing nobody wants to do is sign a lease, set everything up, and watch that unit sit empty while the rent comes out of their pocket every single month. So today, I'm ranking every major neighborhood type in the US from worst to best so you don't need to lose your money making the wrong investment. The first one is going to be downtown entertainment districts, and I'm rating this an F tier. These include cities like Nashville, Scottsdale, New Orleans, and I'm starting out with an F tier because this is where most people who fail at Airbnb start, and I need you to understand why before you do anything else. Look, now this is the obvious choice on paper, right? It's got high demand, everyone knows the cities, there's tourism everywhere, but this is the problem. When you boil down to the certain demographic that you'd be serving, like bachelor parties, bachelorette groups, weekend partiers, weddings, these are shorter stays, which means your occupancy is never gonna add up the way that we need to. These people don't stay for middle of the week. They stay for the weekends, sometime week vacations, but we need to serve a specific demographic that's going to stay a little bit longer. And when you serve these types of people, it's very hard to hit these 90 to 100% occupancy months because of that specific demographic and tourism that are traveling to these areas. Now, the second thing is going to be local regulations. The regulation in these cities are also increasingly targeting short-term rentals. Some of these markets have already made it nearly impossible to operate in, whether it's getting a license, short-term rental permit. We want to stay far away from these markets that have strict regulations, because out of nowhere, these cities can just flip a switch and actually shut down short-term rentals. So we want to go into markets that have a little bit more of a leniency against or with regulations that are going to allow us to operate correctly. Understanding why downtown entertainment districts fails tells you exactly what to look for in the next neighborhoods we'll discuss. The goal is to never only go for exciting markets. The goal is to find reliable ones. The second one is going to be airport corridors, and I'm going to rate this an A tier. You'll find these airports focused locations in Raleigh-Durham, Phoenix Sky Harbor, and Dallas-Fort Worth. Most people completely overlook these markets, and that's exactly why they're worth paying attention to. You got a bunch of red-eye travelers, you got canceled flights, early morning departures, long layovers. This demand never stops, and there's a ton of people that have these layovers or early morning departures that are going to need a place to stay. When you have properties close to these massive airports, you're going to get constant demand because people are constantly traveling. Now, something I want you to keep in mind too, a lot of these people that do take red-eye flights, right, that have early morning departures, they're usually corporate professionals, right? I'm not saying people that go on vacation don't take early flights or have red-eye, flights, but a lot of those people that take those types of flights are usually corporate professionals. So there's really not a slow season when you actually have properties close to these massive airports because of the demographic that are coming in and out of these places, right? The guest profile skews heavily towards business travelers and professionals. Now, there's a lot of demand in these areas throughout the entire year consistently, and the guests are easy to work with. Next, we're going to be heading back down to a market that I'm not the biggest fan of personally. Now, the third is going to be tourist and vacation destinations. I'm going to rate this a C tier. These are places like Destin, Florida, Gatlinburg, the Jersey Shore. Guys, these markets look incredible on paper once again, but most people see the summer numbers and completely miss what happens the other 7 months of the year. When we're evaluating these numbers, we need to look on a 12-month basis. When a lot of people do their research, they're just looking month to month. How much are going to make in high season? What am I going to make in slow season? That's super important, but we need to look on year averages. What are we going to make over the course of the 12 months? So in these markets, summer is great, absolutely, but winter is a completely different story. It's highly seasonal and it's highly tied to how confident people feel about spending money. When you break down the market research over the course of a year average, you're going to notice a massive shift in the summer and the demand compared to the winter and the demand in that season. And we need to understand the two to make sure, okay, will we be profitable in the off season? And what will we really be able to combat on the high season? And does that make sense for us to move into an area like this? I want you to take a look at this from another perspective. When the economy softens, vacation is the first thing that families cut out. So we don't want to have that as our main driving force for the demand in these markets. And that's exactly why I'm rating this a C tier. Again, good months exist in these markets, but you cannot build a reliable business around a market that disappears on half of the year. Now we're going to talk about medical districts and hospital clusters. I'm going to rate this an S tier. Now this is where you can make a lot of money. If you live anywhere near a major hospital system right now, you're going to understand exactly why. So you mainly got travel nurses, and they are going to be the anchor guests for this entire model, right? You have these traveling professionals, specifically traveling nurses, that are staying for 4, 13 weeks at a time. They pay on on time, they treat the property like a temporary home because it is one, which makes low slow season, no weather dependency, no economy sensitivity. The hospitals never stop needing nurses, and it doesn't matter what month it is or what the stock market is doing. These people, these travel nurses, have to go to these markets to work, right? So when we're in a bad economy, well, it doesn't really affect us. So slow season, well, there really isn't one. Now, because of this demographic that you're serving, you're going to get midterm stays, right? 30 plus days, sometimes even a couple months. And these longer term, midterm stays, if you want to call it, are paying short-term rental rates, right? So when you have less people coming into the property, they're staying for longer, puts less strain on the business model. And that's why we want to serve these demographic, right? Compared to serving weekend tourism, right? Well, you have traveling professionals that need to sign long-term contracts with hospitals specifically. Those are the people that we want to serve in these markets. With medical districts, you're going to get professional guests, long stays, and the demand that never turns off. These are the types of neighborhoods that you'll see that are most successful with Airbnb. And once you understand why these types of neighborhoods always work, you'll start seeing these opportunities everywhere. Now we're going to talk about sports stadiums and districts. I'm going to rate this a B tier. Now listen, there's definitely upside in these areas, but there's a ceiling to how much business it gets you. Now listen, stadiums produce big booking spikes during major events, but when you look at something like baseball season, it's only about 140 days out of the year. Most of these stadiums go quiet long stretches after that. You can't really build a steady business around a schedule you didn't create and don't control. Even if you look at other different sports, right? They play in different seasons, right? If we look at the FIFA World Cup, that's great and you'll be able to capitalize on big bookings, but these are very seasonal stuff. We need to go into a market that has constant demand that's not being driven off scheduled events like baseball games, soccer games, football games. We need to have this consistent demand, and that's exactly why I'm rating this a B tier. If stadiums are your only demand driver, your slow seasons are going to hurt. If you want to know exactly how we evaluate markets and build consistent cash flow across our portfolio, the application is in the description below. Fill it out and we'll take a look at your specific situation and go from there. Now let's look at universities and military bases, and I'm going to rate this an A tier. These neighborhoods both deliver recurring, predictable demand pool that shows up whether or not there's an event on the calendar. So when you look at universities, the area brings in a ton of families, right, to visit students, campus tours, researchers, and visiting faculty year round. And that's the exact type of people we want to serve in these properties. Even professors, right, that are traveling to different universities, right, subs, stuff like that. These people are going to need a place to stay, and they're usually signing contracts with these universities for weeks, sometimes months at a time during an actual semester. Military bases deliver a professional guest on orders who show up, they follow the rules, and they take care of the space. Again, it kind of goes hand in hand with the universities, but you have a lot of family that are visiting military bases, right? If they have family actually set at these bases to work. So you have a lot of people coming to these areas. That's why I want to look at military bases, universities, because of the demographic that are in these spaces of work. Now listen, you can absolutely build a professional operation near a university or a military base, but what's coming up next is another S tier. And this is one market that most people don't expect. Corporate relocation zones and tech parks. I'm going to rate this an S tier, and I'll tell you why. Now this one operates exactly like medical districts, except the anchor isn't a hospital. It's corporate expansion, and it's happening in markets most people would never think to look at. Amazon is the clearest example of this. Every time they open a new fulfillment center or corporate campus, they relocate hundreds of employees who need furnished housing for 30 to 90 days. And the guest profile is the same as a travel nurse. Professional, on a schedule, paying on time, and treating the property well because their company is often covering the costs. It runs on corporate timelines, not vacational calendars, right? The season doesn't matter and the weather doesn't matter. Corporate relocation zones belong right next to medical districts at the top of this list. Reliable demand, professional guests, and long-term stays. Historic and art districts. I'm rating this a B tier. These neighborhoods attract people who travel with specific purpose, right? They're not just passing through these areas. They came because they wanted to be there. Now, even though these people are coming for a specific reason, they are leisure travelers. And when the economy softens up, this demographic cuts the culture trip before almost anything else. This is a good market to be near, but not strong enough to build your whole operation around. So although this is better than like a vacational market, right? You have a little bit more constant demand. This is still seasonal, right? If the economy's bad, again, people are going to not travel as much, specifically for historic stuff. We need to keep this in mind when you're looking into these sub-markets. Why are these people coming to travel to these areas, and how is it going to benefit us? Small town markets, I'm rating this an S tier. Now, I know what you're thinking, small towns, but this one catches people entirely off guard every single time, and it's for a good reason. When we look at a small town like Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, very small, nobody is flying there for vacation, but there's a major hospital expansion that's still ongoing, almost $1 billion in renovations, And that one anchor drives reliable professional demand year round. You don't need a big city. You need to have one strong demand driver like a hospital, a distribution center, a government facility, and the market works. Now, the competition in these areas is almost nothing compared to a major metro. You're not fighting 500 other listings. You might be one of 10, right? You need to compare the corporate demand in a market like Raleigh-Durham to New York City. These numbers are closer than most people expect, and the barrier to enter in the smaller market is a fraction of the cost, right? You also have relocating families, also adds up demand in these markets, right? People displaced by floods, home repairs, insurance situations, it adds up. These midterm stays also tend to fly under the radar of local regulations in smaller markets, and these cities aren't writing rules to target professional relocators. While everyone is fighting over Nashville and Miami, these markets are sitting wide open with almost no competition and the same professional demand driving the bookings. Now, knowing the neighborhood type is only half the equation. The other half is knowing exactly which states and specific cities within those neighborhoods are crushing it right now in 2026 and which ones have quietly become impossible to operate in. And that's exactly what I break down in this video right here.